All right, today we're going to dive into something really fascinating, a very, very modern take on the Christian rapture. This isn't some dusty ancient prophecy we're talking about. This is a belief system that popped up around a specific prediction for 2025, and it's literally evolving as we speak in real time.
And that really brings us to the core puzzle of this whole thing. What happens when a prophecy fails? A specific date is set, the world is watching, and then, well, nothing happens. Do people just pack up and go home, abandon their beliefs? Or does the story itself start to change?
So once those predicted dates passed, you see this split happen. For a lot of people, it was just, okay, another failed prediction, moving on. But for a really dedicated group, a completely new idea started to take shape, and it's the foundation for everything we're about to talk about. The idea was this: the date wasn't a failure, it was just misunderstood. It wasn't the finish line, it was the starting gun.
Okay, so to really understand how we got to this point, we've got to go back to the very beginning, to the source of this specific prophecy. So the story kicks off with a South African man named Joshua Mikalela. And according to the source material, he wasn't, some famous pastor or a well-known prophet. He basically came out of nowhere in June 2025 and announced that he'd received a revelation way back in 2018. And this revelation, it pinpointed the exact dates for the rapture, September 23rd and 24th of 2025. And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures that pivot. When the dates came and went, the whole narrative shifted. The new belief was, hey, we misunderstood. It wasn't supposed to be a single sudden event. No, it was the start of a process to take the bride, which is a common term for the church, from the earth. The whole argument changed. A complex, multi-stage operation, they said, had just kicked off.
Okay, so to really get why this whole rapture as a process theory is so different, we need a little bit of background. Let's quickly look at the more traditional views and what the people who believe this new theory are seeing as signs in the world right now.
All right, so to put this all in context, Christian theology basically has three main camps on this. You've got your pre-tribulation view, where believers expect to be taken out before a big 7-year period of suffering. Then there's the mid-tribulation view, where it happens halfway through. And finally, the post-tribulation view, where the church has to go through the whole thing. The theory we're talking about today, it's like a brand new, super detailed twist on that first one, the pre-trib view.
So the big question is, why now? Well, the folks who follow this theory, they're pointing to what they see as a convergence of signs of the times. They're looking at current events, things like UN discussions on a two-state solution for Israel, all the diplomatic pressure in the Middle East, even alliances forming between Israel and its traditional enemies. They also point to preparations to build a third temple in Jerusalem, and world leaders using the very specific biblical phrase, peace and security. For them, these aren't coincidences. They're direct signs that the end is right around the corner.
Okay, so how does all that background stuff build into the core of this theory? Well, it all comes together by framing the rapture not as a single event, but as this incredibly detailed, almost cinematic process. And believe me, this is where the predictions get wildly specific.
So, according to this new interpretation, the rapture is not an instant thing. No, it's a 6-stage event. It kicks off with a massive solar event, which leads to some really bizarre changes in the atmosphere and the sky, then a period of total absolute darkness. Then the release of supernatural beings, and only after all of that comes the final transformation and evacuation of believers.
All right, stage 1, this is the trigger for the whole shebang. The theory predicts this just unprecedented solar event. We're talking way beyond a normal solar flare. The source actually describes it as the sun being torn, releasing this massive wave of energy that literally supercharges Earth's atmosphere, and that sets the stage for everything else to happen. So, as the atmosphere gets all charged up, it's supposed to cause this really strange visual effect. The sky will apparently shift through a bunch of different colors before it finally settles into this global sepia tone, making the entire world look just like an old-timey photograph. And according to the theory, that's it. That is your final, unmistakable warning: get indoors. Now. Then, after that sepia sky, that's when a profound darkness is predicted to just fall over the entire planet. And we're not just talking about nighttime here. We're talking about a complete, absolute, supernatural darkness. A darkness so thick, you literally could not see your own hand an inch from your face. And it's in this darkness that the most dramatic parts of the theory are set to unfold.
Okay, and this is where the theory takes a really sharp turn into something straight out of an apocalypse movie. The source claims that during this total darkness, demonic creatures will be released onto the earth. It actually makes a direct comparison to the whole zombie apocalypse idea we see in movies, even suggesting that Hollywood has been, maybe subconsciously, preparing us all for what's coming.
So you're probably asking, how is anyone supposed to survive that? Well, this is where a concept they call spiritual supercharging comes into play. The theory goes that ever since that original September 2025 date, believers have been kind of spiritually charging up, just like the atmosphere did. And the whole point of this? So that they can become the only sources of light in the entire world during that total darkness. And at last, under the cover of all this global chaos and darkness, the actual rapture finally happens. But again, it's not some instantaneous flash. Instead, it's a process. First, believers' bodies are transformed, and then hours, maybe even days later, they're evacuated from Earth, completely unseen by everyone else left behind. Now, of course, if you're going to reinterpret a single date as the start of a long process, you're going to need a whole new timeline, right? So let's take a look at how the prophetic calendar got a major update. So instead of everything hinging on one date, the prophecy now stretches out over a whole period of time. September 23rd and 24th of 2025, that became the start of the watch. The months that followed were filled with a series of other watch dates, times for observation and reflection, and all of it all builds toward one final hard deadline. And that deadline is June 10th, 2026. Now, what's really fascinating here is the timing. That date is set for the day right before the 2026 FIFA World Cup is supposed to kick off. And a huge part of this prophecy is the claim that the world will be so completely changed by then that the World Cup just won't happen. I mean, that is a very specific and very testable claim. And that brings us right back to where we started. This whole theory, from reinterpreting a failed date to creating this cinematic, step-by-step process, it's really a remarkable example of adaptation. It makes you think, and it raises a much bigger question that goes beyond just prophecy, one that's really for all of us. When our biggest expectations don't line up with reality, how do we change the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of it all?